Hello, and welcome to the show. It is June 8th, 2025. It is Season 4, Episode 22 of Skeptic Generation. I'm your host, Eric Murphy, and, well, we need to talk. So, when it comes to debate, people often talk about fallacy. They'll talk about disingenuous arguments. They'll talk about how to do your best when it comes to, these kind of structured discussions. But often the biggest sins don't fall into any of those categories. And what pisses me off is not any of those. And I want to talk about it, and I think that one of the best people I could talk to is here with me today. My co-host every second Sunday of the month, Elliot, Secular Rarity. How's it going, brother?
Hey, it's good to be here, man. Yeah, I'm excited for this. We have a fun topic, but also it's a topic that you specifically refused to give me more detail about right before the show.
Yep.
You were like, "Hey, man, let me pick your brain real quick on this. What do you think?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, here's my thought, and maybe something like this, and well, I could see it from this angle." And you go, "Mm-hmm." I'm going to tell you on the show. And I'm like, "Oh, what the hell, man?" Well, so this will be great. This will be great. We'll have a lot of fun.
While we put this up, though, the discussion is, the biggest sins of debate. Mm-hmm. And what are those sins? What is the worst of the worst? And it's not just what I have to say, and it's not just what you have to say. We are not the arbiters of it. And so I want to put that out there. We'd love to take your call, 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is ready to talk to you, and we are ready to hear from you. What is the worst sin when it comes to debate? So, Elliot, would you? I would love if you went first, because I think you have a really good one, and like me, it has nothing to do with fallacy, and it has nothing to do with, is it the Kalam cosmological argument? Is it the transcendental argument? No. What is it for you? What is the worst sin?
So I think it is a refusal to clarify. So if you purposefully engage in a discussion or a debate, right? Because I think, in general, the difference is that a debate is more structured, it's more formalized, whereas a discussion a little bit more loose, right? But if you're actively going into that space, right? Not just like sitting around the dinner table, right? Not just some random person on the street. That's not what we're talking about. If you are there to debate, to discuss, and somebody says to you, "Hey, I don't understand. I'm not following. Can you help me out a bit?" Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? Can you break that down for me? Yeah. How are you using that term? And you outright say to them, "Nope, not going to do that." Then I feel like you have missed the entire purpose of what you're doing here. Yeah. It's like, why would you do that at all? You're here to build a brick house, and somebody's like, "All right, cool, we got bricks," and you're like, "Nah, I can't use bricks."
Why not?
And you're like, "Right, but it is a brick house," and it's like, "Nope. Nuh-uh, can't use bricks." And it's like, well, what the fuck are we doing? Sorry,
right?
Sorry.
No,
anyway.
No. You're absolutely right. That is a huge sin. I don't know if it's the worst, actually. I think there's one even worse. But refusing to, because then you have to suss it out, right? If somebody is not giving you their definition, either because they are being weaselly, using weasel wording and all of that, or because they themselves don't have a clear definition. So
that is what I think a lot of the times it comes down to, is that they don't actually have. And the reason that I take that stance is because I always want to say people are not being purposefully bad right? People are not going out of their way to just be jerks in these moments, right?
Right.
In fact, they are, like all of us, a victim of circumstance, and
So
they're go
so
ahead.
I feel like that charity of yours is the
Sure.
seed of
Oh,
the deepest sin for me. But
okay,
I'm going to get there.
okay.
I'm still going to hold this off because I do want to
Yeah,
interact with
yeah,
you on yours. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I think that yeah, no, you have to suss it out, right? So if they don't have a clear definition,
That's
right?
not good.
If they say everybody believes in a god, okay, what do you mean by a god? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And they say, oh, and they change. Or what do you mean by believe? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the Christian definition? The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
That's
sounds
not a great definition,
well.
but it is a definition that I think the way a lot of people use faith,
Yeah.
that's how they say that it's trust. They say that it's synonymous with trust,
Hmm.
but I very much think it's in that version
Right.
that people are
But
thinking about it.
But if you've only ever used it colloquially and then you find yourself in a discussion with somebody and they
Uh-huh.
want you to define it, then you can't define it.
Uh-huh.
Then yeah, no, you can absolutely come off as somebody who's refusing to define things.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, being ignorant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know this sometimes sounds harsh, but being ignorant is not really the problem, right? Like we are all ignorant
Oh
of
yeah,
things, right? There are many times in our lives where we say things or we engage in things or we think things and truly like we've never really taken the moment to go, "Huh. Oh yeah, wait a second. That is a little weird," you know? Like I was having a conversation with a friend of mine once about um, the way that our government works in the United States, and they were like, "Well, hey man, that doesn't make sense from what I was always taught, like in school." And I'm like, "Well, right. So we say this,
yep,
but in actual practice, the way that it works is completely different."
yeah,
And they're like, "But that's not right." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, and many people could argue that it's not right, you know. I'm just telling you how it works, right?"
yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff in our lives that we take for granted and we truly don't investigate, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that isn't necessarily a problem, right? The problem
Well,
comes in when we dig our heels in. The problem comes in when we refuse to take in new information or when we are purposefully not trying to clarify, right? Um,
and I'll give you one more
mhm.
that can fit into that category. Not understanding your context,
Sure.
not understanding the format of your discussion,
Yeah.
right? And that kills me. It because I feel like surrounding shows like this one are people who
Mm,
go, oh wow, I love to see a formal Oxford style debate, or oh, I much
sure.
prefer to see a discussion where people sit down and kind of hash things out together, right?
Mm,
And they've got their pros and cons, and I feel like I've been dropping hints, and I'd love to get into a little bit of it. So the reason that I'm bringing this up
mhm,
is I was helping my buddy Drew with his most recent video. All last week, we were working on a Jordan Peterson video about the 20 atheists versus Jordan Peterson video on
mhm.
Jubilee that everyone's reacting to. I spent a week
Yeah.
rewatching and grabbing clips from that video, and then other clips that support these hypotheses that Drew was making. For people who haven't seen that, by the way, go to Genetically Modified Skeptic. It's a really good video. I'm proud of it, and it went out yesterday. But there's something that Drew did not talk about that I want to talk about. And I have a platform, so we're gonna freaking talk about it. And so I want to show you the scene from that video, which I'm sure is going to get flagged and we're going to need to have a fair use argument over it, but that's fine.
Shouldn't. It shouldn't.
Here's the scene from that video.
straw man of my position. It's a straw man of the argument. So the
wait,
argument is that...
wait a sec. You said find one maxim that's transcendent across situations.
I didn't say any of those words. I'm not sure what conversation you're a part of.
Don't be a smartass.
I'm sorry.
Seriously, I mean it. If we're going to have a serious conversation, conduct yourself properly.
Okay.
Don't be a smartass, Elliot.
Yeah.
Don't be a smartass.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's hard for me, I'll be honest.
That got my blood up. Hopefully, by the way, people were able to hear it. Let me know in the chat if you were not able to. But I really needed to break down what it was that got my heart rate going so much. Because I kind of pride myself on being somebody who does not get super upset very easily, right? And I think because, just like you said earlier, right? If somebody is using flawed logic, if they're using fallacious reasoning, we can figure that out together. It's not always their fault. You know, we can help build up that toolbox. If somebody is using a really bad argument, like the transcendental argument for the existence of God, if somebody is, you know, doing that whole approach, then we know how to interact with those arguments. So what is it about this? Because this isn't a fallacy saying don't be a smartass.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
This isn't. No. So what do you think? Because I've got a very, very strict idea of what it is, and I'd love to hear if you're on the same page.
Well, it seems to me like it's in the same, in the same vein as kind of what I was talking about, or a refusal to clarify. So I think a lot of it has to do with your demeanor and your attitude. Your behavior in the discussion or the debate itself is a big part of it. I don't know if that's exactly where you're going, but that's the connection that I see already between the two things we pointed out.
Well, I can show you. I'll show you another clip from just a little bit earlier in this discussion.
Real quick, I do just want to say though, Ian's great. I do like Ian, and been really excited to see him jump on the scene. And
nice.
Yeah, he's been doing great, man. He's been getting all kinds of awesome views going live on TikTok and stuff. And, very, very happy to see the community growing and new faces getting around. So it's awesome.
Agreed. All right. Here is the discussion. Here's the clip from before that helps give it a little bit more context.
Said that the specific statements you made don't take the context of the stories into account, and so that your analytical approach is faulty.
Sure.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go through the example. Yeah, so, and I apologize. So let's go through the example.
Okay. So I have a problem where just because I'm producing at the same time, I'm not able to hear it. And I know I queued this up for a reason. So what happened in the clip?
Jordan was like, don't put words in my mouth. Like, it was that moment.
Right. So you have, let me take a step back and see if I can introduce this holistically. There are different types of ways we can interact, and the two that we talk about the most are structured, kind of Oxford style debates, where people are given a certain amount of time to stand up and talk at each other. And they're not even talking at each other, they're talking at the audience, right? And it is an appeal to try and convince the people who are watching to take both points of view, right? It is a very intentional structure. The other that people will use is the informal debate, right? A discussion between two people. We're sitting across from each other, right? We're engaging in a natural way. And I think we know the pitfalls of the Oxford style debate, but we don't always understand the pitfalls of informal discussion. And Elliot, you and I do the informal discussion stuff all the time. And so what is it? What is this? You have to recognize, and I know you do, but just for the audience, you have to recognize that an informal discussion is constantly being negotiated between the people involved. So you set a standard, and then you respect that standard, right? If you and I, Elliot, are having a debate and I crack a joke and you're cool with it and you laugh, then later on, if you crack a joke, I should reciprocate in the same way that you did, right? That there's this dependence on reciprocation. It is not a spoken, it is not a set rule, but it is something we are negotiating together. And so you have Jordan Peterson in that second clip, right, which happened earlier in the discussion they were having. He got really, really upset when words were being put in his mouth, right? When he was not being understood word for word.
Yeah.
And then in the second clip, he is misunderstanding. He's not representing his interlocutor correctly. He gets called out on it. He says, "You're straw manning me." Jordan Peterson gets pissed off and starts throwing out name calling instead of addressing it. But Jordan Peterson set the standard earlier. If somebody puts words in your mouth, you have every right to call it out. And I'm sorry, what's the name of the gentleman he was debating with?
Ian.
Ian was gracious. Ian laughed and said, "Hey, I'm sorry," right? Which now we have created a blueprint that if somebody puts words in the other person's mouth, you can call them out, the other person says sorry, and then you move on. And then when it came time to reciprocate, that's not what happened, right? This is bullying, but I want to be very clear on why it is and how it is. Because it's not just, oh, he's bullying me. No. What it is you are depending on social convention to get away with shitty behavior. You're depending on the other person to be the better person so that you can depend on that. You can rely on them letting you get away with shit so that later on when you don't let them get away with shit, it's a shock. Right? It catches you off guard. If you had not had that setup a few minutes prior with "don't put words in my mouth," the second part would not be as impactful because they have already set the terms of the discussion earlier by negotiating that in the way that they were communicating. Right? I have another that absolutely kills me. Right? You have.
So, do you believe in the
This
all-knowing,
clip?
all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean
How
when
is
you
that
say you
circular?
believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right. So if
What's
you
a belief?
believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You live for
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. Is what the hell
and
is
you
going on?
die for it. That's what I mean by that.
I mean,
So
God, he sucks.
well, I'm seeing all over the place. People are talking about, using poor definitions. That's what's happened. He's used a non-functional definition. Fine.
Yeah.
That's not the thing that pisses me off. What pisses me off is that they have now set a standard, right? Where Jordan Peterson was being very flowery and very vague, ambiguous in his definition. And he was saying it with conviction, and his interlocutor let him get away with it and said, "Hey, if you're going to use that definition, I'm okay with that. I'm going to meet you where you're at, right? I'm going to engage with you that way." So that is the convention that they created together. That is the norm that they set for their discussion. So a few minutes later, when this happens,
Did you eat
Don't
today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just
Yes,
asking if
you
you ate
are.
it.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game.
Yeah. That whole thing was silly. It
right? So
just that whole interaction with Jordan Peterson there was, and I forget that guy's name too. He's also kind of new on the rise and
Nice.
crushing it real well.
good. So I'd love to interact with those people. They seemed great. But again, you had now a negotiated discussion format, right? You were constantly negotiating when you're in an informal discussion with somebody. And what was negotiated earlier was, if there's vagueness, if there's a little wishy-washiness, if something's going on like that, we're going to push through, and I'm going to allow that, and that's going to be okay. And then as soon as Jordan Peterson started to see that, oh, maybe this is not, where I want it to be, this is maybe a little wishy-washy, I'm going to say, don't play games with me. Now, if they hadn't already had an analogous scenario earlier,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be as impactful. What the problem here is, it feels like there is a transgression, right? We have moved from, this is how we interact, to, you're not reciprocating the interaction. And I feel like it's a problem that a lot of people have that they don't recognize, right? People say, oh, I'd much rather have an informal discussion. That way, we're really just engaging with each other. And that's really sweet. But there be dragons there. There is a poison that you open yourself up to that's not there when it comes to structured debate. And the poison is that people can be fucking bullies, right? It's not just about Jordan Peterson using weird definitions or using weird logic or whatever the case is. It's the feigned indignance, and it's the bullying, trying to use this kind of, two different rule sets. The one where you are more generous to me, and the one where I am fucking not less generous to you, but indignant about it. Right? It's that disparity that pisses me off. And I think that is the worst sin. By the way, somebody in the live chat said, oh, sin is just a transgression against God. And I think that, yes, but I've changed my definition of sin to be a transgression against... a transgression against something that people agree together is sacred in some way, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like...
a higher value than just an individual.
Right.
Like, I don't think... Yeah, we have that just because we're not believing in God, you guys. Like, come on.
I mean, context clues for sure. No. But what a transgression to! I feel like reciprocation, social reciprocation, is at the core of meaningful dialogue, right?
Yeah,
we need to not just have the discussion about the topic, but we need to agree together on the way we're going to discuss that. Maybe we don't tell fucking jokes. Maybe we take this seriously, and that's fine. We both now take this seriously, and we know joking's not really in the cards in this discussion, and that's okay because we've agreed to it, right? Or we've agreed that we're going to be very clear and not be wishy-washy on our definitions. Okay, cool. That means, though, that, calling each other out is now changing the rules. And Jordan Peterson continuously did that in the video. And I feel like that is something that has informed the way a lot of people interact. I think that it's not just bullies. I think that, abusers, narcissistic personalities will depend on social convention to force their way around because they're depending on everyone else to be better than them. And I think that a lot of people who maybe grew up with a narcissist parent or an abusive, significant other, as a young adult or whatever the case is, I feel like those are the people who tend to say, I love structured debate. I love when it's Oxford style and people are standing and have their time and that's it. And I think that's because when you've experienced being pushed around like that, you want structure, you want rules to prevent that. And I feel like that is one of the big benefits of the Oxford style debate, because that is not allowed. And for people who maybe have gotten more used to charitable discussions and an interlocutor who doesn't do that, you see the extreme limitations of an Oxford style debate, right? You're not able to actually interact with each other. And so people go back the other way. I prefer a a casual discussion instead, non-structured discussion. But I feel like now we have built up non-structured discussions to be something that is a privilege. And that privilege is predicated on us showing the same kindness that we're afforded. And that wasn't done here. And I feel like that is the biggest sin in debate of any kind. And what's more, it's not just, Elliot, you and I have talked plenty about people who have platforms, right? What our obligation is, and how you and I have conversations with people we never talk to in real life, one-on-one, because fuck that. We see there's value in us having, shitty discussions with shitty people, right? Because people are watching. And we have different rule sets for how you and I interact as a host on the show versus what we do when we are just one-on-one with another person. And I feel like this through line, it's not just on a show. It's not just on a stage. It's not just in person. It is every time we interact. There is an expectation of reciprocation if there's going to be any kind of meaningful dialogue. And when that gets broken down, that feels like the biggest sin one can commit, because you can be flawed in your logic. You can be flawed. You can use logical fallacy. You can use shitty arguments. That's fine. Because as long as you're going to listen to each other and reciprocate and make sure that you are operating on the same grounds, you can still interact. But when you do what Jordan Peterson did in those clips, you have made interaction fundamentally impossible. And so when I see people who are doing these reactions online, 5 things to make you a better debater. Mistakes people made. What I'm not seeing, because this is not a structured thing, this is not a formal fallacy, it's just being a shitty person.
Yeah.
That makes interaction impossible. You are not able to interact with somebody who does that. At least that's what I think. What do you think? I talked at you a lot.
No. There was a lot of good stuff, man. And I think, that is probably the label I would give to this, is just shitty behavior, or just not conducive for social interaction. I could see bullying being used as the label. It's probably just not what I would call it. I'd just be like, man, Jordan Peterson's a dick. But maybe that's bullying on my part. But what?
I honestly, that's what's so insidious about it, is that you hear bullying and you think schoolyard. I don't think that's fair. They're picking on me. And you don't see it as something that's really insidious, because the word bullying feels like it's not as big of a deal. And so maybe,
I think it's,
go ahead.
I think that might be part of it. I just think for me, just the term bully is just never something I've ever utilized in my vocabulary. I just think there are better terms that we can use, like abuser or asshole or fuck that guy. So that it's not, I think maybe on a societal context, that's the way people like put bullying in a different category, or bullies in a different category.
So then,
but just for me, it's just not a word that's just in my lexicon, really.
So let's then be more specific, because we can put some things in our lexicon, because I do want to give people a way to call this out, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So what I would say is, hey, you're using a manipulative argumentation tactic. And your tactic, it doesn't even interact necessarily with what you're saying. It's the fact that you are relying on the generosity of the person who's interacting with you to take advantage of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Yeah, I think that is, again, abusive, emotionally abusive, sure. Psychologically abusive, sure. Like totally fine with all of those. And I do believe that is that, again, like I'd said earlier, both this as well as, what I initially brought up about a refusal to clarify and a refusal to explain your point and stuff, that comes back to how you're engaging specifically in this conversation, right? And I think that is something that we have completely forgotten to talk about for a while now in terms of these moments. You're right. We've talked a lot about this is how you build an argument. This is how you call out a bad argument.
Yeah. Here's how you build a more rigorous epistemic framework, right? Here's how you get the best tools for the job.
Yeah, here's all the big words and where to put them in the sentence, but very rarely do I see a lot of discussion on how to actually interact and how to engage in a way that is conducive for those conversations to continue. I don't think it's completely non-existent, but I do think it is few and far between, unfortunately. And it's in part, it's because it is what's popular. Like for a long time now, what has been popular is not to keep the conversation going, but to be the first person to shut the conversation down. Mm-hmm. The first person in the debate or the discussion that can get the other person to like shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like a weak little bitch.
Yeah. Right.
Like that's how you won. That's how you've won for so long. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like, and so because of that, everybody has been sitting at home, in their bedroom with their little notepad going, what's the one-liner that'll shut up the
right.
What's the thing that I can say that
to
just
make them a
the
weak
mic,
little bitch so that they can be done. Yeah.
Right.
And I think I'm sitting at it from this very privileged position of I'm so far on the other side, I forgot that was the case. And so when I see it, it feels like it's that forgotten bit. It's the, oh, right. The reason people don't always engage in informal discussion is because people are fucking shitty, or they can be, right? It's not even gaslighting. I saw in the live chat, it's gaslighting. Gaslighting is when I lie to you about reality, right? And
say you're crazy.
And say you're, It comes from the movie. It makes you question your reality. Yeah. I don't even think I need to necessarily say you're crazy as much as just call your reality into question, right, and lie to you about it.
We talk about that later.
Understood. It's the word crazy that makes me feel weird.
Okay. No. Calling your mental health into question is what it is. It's saying that the reason that you're mistaken on the thing is because your mental health is actually failing you.
Right.
Right. But anyway, no, yeah. I'm with you. Crazy isn't the right word there. Yeah. Anyway. Sorry. I know that was a tangent. No.
It's important. I feel like we're rounding this out. And I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but really, like, it's that simple. Recognize that an informal discussion is not something that you can have structured rules for, because it's going to be different from person to person. I really enjoy when people are able to crack jokes, and I really hate when they're ambiguous with definitions. Someone can be the opposite way. Somebody like Jordan Peterson, I think, loves to be ambiguous with definitions and is okay with cracking jokes so long as he's the only one doing it. Right? Those are very, very different rules. And as long as the other person is getting this, as long as you're able to have it reflect both ways, you're good. But when you are the only person who gets to benefit from this rule, discussion can't even begin.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's why.
Yeah.
I think, and you tell me if I go too far on this, okay? And I'm not saying Peterson is necessarily in this camp. I think maybe, but because of what you just said,
mm-hmm.
I think that's the reason why for the last couple of years, I have started taking some harder stances in the sense of, I really don't think anybody should be talking to X person anymore. And because of this type of behavior in discussions that they have displayed repeatedly,
mm-hmm.
right? Not because, oh man, they're just really wrong, right? And honestly, not even necessarily just because some of the things that they're saying are bad, right? Because I
Right.
do think there is sometimes good value
Yeah.
in discussing with people that have really messed up ideas.
And
you
people are
know?
people in the comments, I can already tell you, are going to say, but there's benefit to having that discussion because people are going to get some kind of use out of it,
Sometimes.
right? Especially if you're talking to somebody who's absolutely, a bigoted shithead, because then you get to
Sure.
expose their bad ideas for what they are.
Yeah.
So
But there are some people, I think, based on some of the criteria that we've been talking about today, that should fall into that category for us of there's no reason to speak to this person anymore like this. There's no reason to purposefully attempt to bring that person to the discussion table because every single time we do, they shit all over the table and flip it.
Right.
And that's what happens every time. And there is no reason. And somebody will say, well, I mean, how else are we going to push back against? You can't let those ideas fester in the dark.
Well,
that's not what I'm saying.
no.
You can still discuss the terrible things that they say and do. You just don't have to call them over to your freaking house to do it.
Well, so I think we can actually expand that because what people like Jordan Peterson do when they're not given the stage that they want to have is they say, you don't want to talk about the subject. He's not the only person who has these opinions, right? If somebody is a racist, if somebody is a transphobe, a bigot, whatever the case is, right? There are lots of those people. So if you want to have the discussion about bigotry, if you want to have discussions about transphobia and all it, like, you can have those discussions with people who aren't bullies, who aren't manipulators, social manipulators. And so when you say we're not bringing you to the table, they say, oh, you don't want to talk about my topic. No, I do want to talk about your topic. I don't think you should be the person representing your topic. And if you think you are the only person who can, that is a fucking weird you problem.
Yeah.
But
there are
don't
better
accuse
people in your camp that can do and I honestly, as somebody that has not been in the church for a while now, I often will say about Jordan Peterson, one of my biggest criticisms is, had I been a believer at the same time that Jordan Peterson was engaging and behaving like this, I would be purposefully going out of my way to tell everybody I knew whenever the topic came up, he's not a Christian. Like, he's not in my camp, you know? As a non-believer now, I am more offended for the believers out there because this guy is taking your flag and your label and just rubbing it all over his ass and just doing whatever he wants with it. And like, that is so offensive. I cannot believe. But hey, whatever. That's whatever. You guys want him, you claim him. I don't care. Do your thing.
I want to continue, but I do want to put the phone number out there. We've got open lines. I can tell people are engaged, but I think they might just be too interested in listening to the discussion. Call in. We want to hear what you have to say. The phone number is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is on the line, and we would love to hear what you hear your point. Do you think that there is a bigger sin? Do you think that there is a usefulness here that we are not addressing? And what a good point. I do just want to, circle back to what you just said, because when you disinclude someone from a discussion, you say that person is not invited. Mm-hmm. That does not mean you don't want to have the discussion about what their issue is. They have just lost the privilege of being the person to represent it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I often have found, not always, okay? Not always, you guys. Not 100%, but oftentimes I have found the people making that claim the loudest are the ones that are also actively refusing the conversation, with a good handful of different people that will truly have a sit down and an honest look. If this takes 3 more hours, it'll take 3 more hours. We'll be here.
Yeah.
They're those type of people. And then I see the video that comes out and it's like, they won't talk to me. They're shutting me down. Why won't they? And then, funny enough, I can just think of the names that have said, any day, anytime, call me up. We can do it live. We can do it recorded. We can do it private, whatever you want. We can do it over email. We can do it over text. We can do it in a house with a mouse. I don't care. Your
in a
choice.
box with a fox. Yeah.
Like it's a tactic, mind you, right? It's a debate tactic in and of itself, because what happens is you set up this scenario to begin with as if you are, you're just this lone hero fighting so hard.
Yeah, you are holding the banner. Discussion. You are the banner holder of your topic. Right. You are the exemplar, the leading the charge. Yeah.
And because of that sacrifice that you are engaging in, that's why they don't want to discuss with you, because they know how right you are. So by the time you've built up this, this stupid legend, by the time you've done all that and you actually sit down for a debate with somebody, right? You just get to play on that the entire time. And you get to use that as kind of a retreat moment for you. And you just get to, well, see, I mean, they just don't want to discuss, that's just ridiculous. And it's like, well, hang on. I'm here now. Like, I'm trying to talk with you. Do you not want to talk? Do you not want to explain? Like, I mean, the fact that Jordan Peterson agreed to a discussion, okay, with a platform like Jubilee. It's not a small platform. It's not like he wasn't aware of what happened. Guys, to make Jubilee happen, there's a production team.
Oh, yeah.
There's a schedule with contracts.
A whole studio.
Lawyers are involved. So, Jordan Peterson was well aware. They asked him specifically to bring claims, to bring statements that he would say that would start a 20-minute discussion with this round table of people, right? And at one point in the conversation, somebody says to him, it might have been Danny from Phil Talk, where he says, are you a Christian or are you not? And Jordan's response is literally, I might be, but I don't have to tell you that.
Yep.
There's no reason to have that individual at the table again. Guys, if somebody actively shits all over your dinner table while you're eating, there's no reason to invite them back. One time they made a super, super bomb chicken pot pie. I agree. But not for a long time.
Here's the thing is he never has. So if we're going to get into that, then I'm willing to get into that. We have our first caller who's going to get screened, and I'm happy to see that. But if we're going to get in on Jordan Peterson, let's get in on Jordan Peterson for just a few minutes, right? We can be the 10 millionth people to do it. Super original, super brave of us, I know. But dude first came onto my radar in 2015, 2016, when the university that he was working for decided that they were going to add non-binary and transgender to the list of protected groups when it comes to hate speech on campus.
Yeah.
And what Jordan Peterson said was that the thought police were forcing him to change his language, and that he was having his civil liberties trampled on because he was being forced to use words that he did not agree with. What he was being forced to do was not engage in hate speech. And because, right? So what are you mad about?
That's
right?
tough for some people.
and here's the thing. Here's the thing. The university was incredibly charitable because they did not think that Jordan Peterson was inferring that he was talking about hate speech, because he's very vague and ambiguous. And so they were like, well, you can say whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Asterisk, as long as it's not fucking hate speech, obviously. Right? And so the university clarified. Jordan Peterson put that as a personal win that they backed down. Not the case. And then what? He wrote a book that is entirely unoriginal. Clean Your Fucking Room. Good job. That's great. He provided himself as a father figure that people could relate to, who told them to clean their room, and people liked that. They did. And then he also brought out, Jungian ideas and these kind of meta narratives. It sounds like you have something to say. So before I get into Jungian, tell what's on your mind.
Just real quick. And the only reason I bring this up is because it is regularly used by the people that support Jordan Peterson and many a religious apologist. Okay. This is the only reason that I bring this up. I do think it's necessary. Jordan Peterson built his career in part on giving people a set of guidelines and values of how to live their life well and be very productive and successful, and actively failed at it.
Well,
Was a drug addict for years, doing fucked up shit behind the scenes, and got called out on it just a handful of years ago, right before, oddly enough, he made a pretty large, seemingly sincere shift in his political stance and stuff.
Okay.
The only reason I bring that up is because
why are you
it is a
making me
standard
defend Jordan
line.
Peterson?
What?
Why are you making me defend Jordan Peterson?
No, hang on. Hang on. The reason I bring that up is because oftentimes it is levied at the non-believer or the non-Jordan Peterson fan. They will say, well, if your stuff is so right, how come it doesn't lead to a better productive life? How come you're not following? How come your life's not better? That's oftentimes the response that they give. And so I just think it's valuable here.
The response to both, and I think that you're implying it, so I just want to say it very, very plainly. Hypocrisy does not make a thing more or less true.
I know that. I agree. I'm just saying, if that's your stance, you can't use it here.
Well,
that's all. You're right.
So calling out hypocrisy does not make your claim more or less true. And it also does not make an accusation more or less valid, because hypocrisy has nothing to do with the validity of a claim. And so it cuts both ways. And I feel like you lined out both ways that can be cut by that. Right?
True.
So so the clean your room, take personal responsibility narrative is one that is inspiring to a lot of people. But we have to recognize that that was built on the back of what? Misrepresenting and claiming to be a martyr. Right? Now, the big problem here is, and this is again, right? People are showing up and wondering, what's this episode about? This episode's about the worst sins that you can commit in a discussion or a debate. Elliot puts forward that the worst sin that you can commit is refusing to define terms. To me, the worst sin you can commit is depending on the other person to be the better person so that you can be an asshole. Right? It's specifically that kind of gaslighty, bullying bullshit. And we lined it out. We showed clips. We gave examples. And now we're here. And now we're talking about Jordan Peterson, which is frustrating because I worked on this video for Drew, and there's something that Drew called out 2 different ways that I'm going to call attention to. You guys should still watch the video, but it's number 1, a really, really good quote, and number 2, just a really good point. Jordan Peterson has said years and years ago that when his detractors call him out, he gets more patrons. And when people protest against him, he gets an avalanche of patrons. There is no amount of hate on one side that is going to make him go away, because the more attention that shit gets, the bigger it gets because you're not going to support him. You're just putting him in front of the eyes of people who will. And so not engaging is the correct thing. And so it's fun, it's cathartic to do, but I also have to recognize that what I'm doing also empowers him. So it is what it is.
That's why I think there is great value in reaction, right? A detailed breakdown of previous engagements, right? Especially if the views haven't changed. You know, I think somebody in the chat brought up Kent Hovind. Like, there is absolutely, literally, fucking-batum, no words different that Kent is going to say. He's had the exact same talking points for 2+ decades, right? Well before, you know, he was found out to have been abusing his second or third wife. You know, well before the tax fraud that he was found guilty of. You know, well before all of the child abuse that was happening on his property that he actively let that individual stay and gave money from his nonprofit organization. Technically, I mean, 100% in violation of law. All of this is public knowledge. Sorry, I'm just putting it out there in case anybody didn't know. But he said the same thing. You don't need to invite him on today to have him re-spout it. Just go pull up the things that he said. You can play a little clip.
Yeah.
You can talk
there are a lot
of
people with his views that can espouse them that aren't pieces of shit.
Right.
But
Right.
the interesting thing is now we're applying that differently. And I do want to clarify why we're applying it differently and how it's different, because I don't want to give people the idea that the way Jordan Peterson was shitty is the same way that Ray Comfort was shitty. Or not Ray Comfort, sorry.
No, you could talk about Ray Comfort too.
No, not Ray Comfort.
But yeah, Kent Hovind.
Kent Hovind. Because here's the thing with Kent, is what he does is he does fallacies, right? He engages in fallacious reasoning. He uses ad hominem attacks. He creates straw men of his opponent. He denigrates the other side instead of supporting his own evidence, right? All of those things I feel like so much patience for. I'm totally okay with those types of flawed reasoning. If somebody brings that, I'm not going to get pissed off. What does get me is the Ray Comfort type. The Ray Comfort type who will build a rapport with you and say, have you ever lied? Oh, you have? Then you're a liar and you deserve to go to hell, right? It's I'm going to depend on negotiating with my interlocutor an agreement that we're going to be charitable, right? He depends on the other person to go, oh, of course I've lied before, but you know, if we're going to be a little loose here with that, if, you know, then as long as we're being charitable with each other in both directions. And immediately he uses that charity to his example, to his benefit, to then attack the other person in a way that, like, he's relying on the other person to be the better person. And so in that way, I think the Ray Comforts out there should not be engaged with. If we're talking about, why am I blanking on his name? Because I'm just thinking about the name Ray Comfort.
Kent Hovind?
Kent Hovind.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the Kent Hovinds out there, we don't want to engage with Kent Hovind specifically because what he's done socially is verboten. He's done really shitty things. And so because of that, we don't want to interact with him, you know, just as a, like, because the dude's gross. But somebody being gross, I feel like, is up for debate and how much people want to put up with. But you could at least do something meaningful with what comes out of his mouth. When you get the Jordan Peterson, Ray Comfort types, what is literally coming out of their mouth is not workable. It is not usable. It is not beneficial because it is predicated on taking advantage of the kindness of the person you are interacting with and setting up a double standard that you can use to try and crucify the other person, right? I'm going to make a joke. And the second you make a joke, I'm going to say, don't be a fucking smartass. I'm going to be very ambiguous with my language. And as soon as you're ambiguous with your language, you're going to say, don't put words in my mouth. Take this seriously. And so what a turn, right? If somebody was charitable with you and you do not share that back, then I feel like you have transgressed what has already been negotiated. And that you cannot come back from directly. It's not just this is a shitty person because they did shitty things. It is because here is how they are interacting. The way that they are doing this in that moment because of what's going on right here makes it impossible to have the discussion on its face. Jordan Peterson can be a fucking saint, but because of the way that he interacts in this manipulative fucking way, what he has to say is not viable in discussion, because you don't ever get to the point. You get to personal indignation and you get to frustrating double standards that don't get you anywhere. Do you kind of see the difference?
Oh no, totally do, and I'm with you. There's one thing that I wanted to push back on, which is just the ability to get back on track in the conversation when something like that happens.
Yeah,
I do think there is a way, but I think it requires
a mute button.
Say again?
A mute button.
Well, not necessarily. I think what it requires is practice and knowledge on both sides, right? And humility, right? So I think it is possible, right? For instance, in a conversation, for something like that to happen, and then somebody to go, well, hang on a second, Eric. Like, I wasn't trying to offend with that joke. You know, you made a joke earlier about atheists, you know, and I knew you weren't trying to offend. That's my bad. I'll keep that in mind going forward. And then you go, you know what, Elliot, you're right. You know what? I did make that joke about atheists, or my bad. You know, you weren't trying to. Okay, cool. You know, so I think that. Go ahead.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
You cannot depend. I thought you were going to say if everybody's just nicer to each other. No, because what we're talking about is somebody not being charitable, not being generous in the same way that's been negotiated. If somebody is breaking that rule in an informal discussion, then what you have to do is exactly what you said. Hang a lantern on it and say, stop, hold on. You made a joke and I was okay. I made a joke and you got personally indignant. And so now I no longer know what we have negotiated when it comes to making jokes, because I interacted in a generous way and you've acted in a less generous way. And so if we're going to continue this, I need to know what the consistent response is, because if it's personal indignation, then I should take a second to be pissed off about you making a joke earlier. But if we're going to be charitable with each other, you need to calm your fucking tits, because that is not cool. That is not appropriate.
The way a buddy of mine has described it for a long time, and it's both about conversation and about relationship. But, you know, this one specifically about conversation is that, you know, it's a dance. And I'll just tell you this right here, right now. I'm going to step on your toes, and I'm relying on you to say, ow, when I do that, you know. Now with that, understand, you're going to step on my toes and you're relying on me to say ow, right? Also, I got to keep in mind that, you know, maybe you didn't step on my toes on purpose, right? Maybe you did. And we can cross that bridge. But in general, I know the last time that I stepped on your toes and you said ow, I felt terrible and I truly didn't mean to. But that requires, again, that humility and that willingness on every person to be able to say, like, oh, you know what? I did cross that line and I did that shitty behavior.
But I think you're saying the part that everybody like is implicitly thinking is the case, that we're going to do that, right? But so the example, because I want to play this again, because I want to be really clear that you have a transgression here that is very specific. Right. So you have Jordan Peterson earlier saying in this discussion, hey, you're putting words in my mouth. That's not okay. You're strawmanning my position. And so in this clip, his interlocutor now feels strawmanned. And so he's going to say, I'm feeling strawmanned. You're strawmanning my position. You have what just happened now inverted, right? And so because, when Jordan Peterson accused his interlocutor of strawmanning, right? His interlocutor said, hey, I did not mean that. I'm sorry. Let's continue. The expectation is that if he gets called out and said, hey, you're strawmanning my position, Jordan Peterson would hopefully say, hey, sorry about that. Didn't mean that. Let's continue, right? What do we get?
Position. It's a straw man of the argument. So
In what
the
way?
argument
No,
is
wait,
that God,
wait a sec. You
Well, I'm already
said
waiting a
find
sec.
one maxim that's transcendent across situations.
I didn't
and
say
I
any
just
of
did.
those words. I'm not sure what
Okay,
conversation
rephrase.
you're a part of.
Don't be a smartass.
I'm sorry.
Seriously, I mean it. If we're going to have a serious conversation, conduct yourself properly.
Okay.
And his interlocutor rolls with it. Because what are you supposed to do? Right?
Yeah.
You now
If I may
Yeah.
reframe just a little with the dancing analogy.
Yeah.
These two are dancing. Jordan says, ow, you stepped on my toes.
Oh, hey. Sorry.
Ian says, oh, what?
No. Ian says, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ian says, oh, I'm sorry, right? Let's keep dancing, right? Then Ian goes, ow, you stepped on my toes. And Jordan says,
Don't be a fucking
oh, well.
smartass.
Yeah, don't be a smartass.
That's what you get
Don't be a smartass. We're dancing.
Yeah, that's what you get for having your feet in the wrong position.
Yeah, and okay, is that? Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's a fair framing of it?
Yeah, I do.
Then that's where, and that is why because I totally fucking agree, man. I'm so glad we're here. I feel that good feeling where I feel like we're finally on the same 100% same page.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you stop dancing. That's where that person doesn't get to come back to dance, right?
Right.
I mean, is that fair? That's a fair line,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Because
I think
what
so.
you've done very specifically is you have, right, and this only happens in non-formal debates. This happens in a sit-down discussion, and it is a poison that people don't recognize and don't talk about very explicitly. And that is that you are consistently negotiating the rules of your discussion. You are consistently negotiating how you're interacting with certain ideas. And if I say ow and you say sorry, that means that when you say ow, I should say sorry, right? There's a reciprocation there. And when you rely on that reciprocation to take advantage of and feign indignance about, you have transgressed that. Now you have.
We're not dancing anymore.
No. And the reason he does it is because he wants to set himself up as an authority, as a parental figure, someone who's looking down on and is schooling these unruly children.
Right.
And it's a power play that can only be made by manipulative, abusive people. Because it is a manipulative, abusive tactic. I don't think you can develop that skill in a bubble. I don't think he just developed that skill when it comes to talking about philosophy. I think that's a skill that you develop over a lifetime of being fucking abusive and manipulative in your life with other people. Because it came incredibly naturally to him. So, just saying. All right, we've got callers on the line. Let's talk. Let's go with Doug in Arizona. Doug, you're live on the show.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes, hello. What do you want to talk about?
I just thought I would give you some of the tips I use when having conversations. You were talking about certain people shitting all over the table, and whenever someone asks you a question, you now are in the power position because they want an answer from you. They want something from you. So if there's any type of animosity or you're sensing that some, foul play going on, all you do is you ask for kindness. You say, I will answer your question, but you first have to use the word please and pre-thank me for any answer I might give.
Yeah, that feels shitty. I don't like that.
Why is that shitty?
So the thing is, the please and thank you ahead of time. I know people who've done both, right, on both sides of it. I have been personally manipulated by people who say, "Hey, Eric, can you help me move this weekend? Thank you so much. It's really great." Right? You're setting up an expectation that you are thanking me and obliging me to say yes before I've agreed, right? Which is kind of shitty. And having
Well,
them thank you ahead of time kind of sets up a weird obligation that has not yet necessarily been agreed to. And then the please ahead of time, also, you don't require a please of them. You give them a please, and then you expect it in return. But if you require it off the bat, I think that sets up a weird power dynamic where you are kind of creating your a parental, between you and the person you're with. You're now kind of setting it in
Right,
a
but
weird
this
way.
is, you only do this when they have kind of like crossed the line.
Ah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I think that if someone has crossed the line and you're calling them out on it, I don't know. I'll toss it up to the two of you, right? If I have fully crossed the line, if I've stepped on your toes and said it's your fucking fault, get your toes out of the way, and I've completely broken the rules that we have negotiated together during our conversation, how much should you call them out? Should you say, "Hey, you asked please and thank you," right? That feels like it's kind of debasing them a little bit to shame them, maybe? I don't know.
So my kind of viewpoint on this, and this definitely is not something that I've come to on my own. This is, after years of looking at different things and hearing from others as to what works and learning about, long-term relationships and how to kind of handle those better, right? People will give the soft sciences a lot of crap, but let's be honest, like we do know quite a lot about like psychology and sociology and stuff. But I often find, and I just did it right there, I statements, are one of the best things to do in these types of moments. So instead of "you attacked me," right? Instead of "you acted like an asshole to me," right? I'm feeling attacked right now. Hey, I feel like you stepped on my toes and you don't really care, and I'm kind of hurt by that, and I don't know that I want to dance anymore. Right? That's not. It is letting that person know that a line has definitely been crossed, that they did. It is not letting them off the hook. It is not just giving undue charity to somebody, but it is also reframing it in a way that is about you and you dancing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that oftentimes is more beneficial. It's not easy. It's not always easy to do. Believe me, I yell at people too, guys. But
I think I'm recognizing I'm in a contrarian mood. I didn't fully agree with
You
Doug,
might
and
be.
I'm not fully agreeing with you, and I'm wondering if I'm ever going to fully agree with anyone this morning. And because of that, Doug, I apologize for a lack of of charity on my part. Now I'm going to display that lack of charity to Elliot for just a second. Elliot, so
that's what I'm here for, man. Just your
Right?
punching bag every couple of weeks.
every time, you love it. I love when people call me out on my shit, and I do it in return because I'm setting a social expectation that that's okay. Anyway, right? We've negotiated this, and we found that it's fun. But I think that's useful in interpersonal discussion when you're talking to a family member or you're talking to somebody that you want to have a relationship with. Using I statements is great. That's not what I do on the shows.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think in a more formalized, in a more structured setting.
But we're we're not having Oxford style debate. This is still unstructured. It's just in front of an audience, and so maybe I have a better example.
Okay.
Right, because the I statements I think are very, very useful when you want to have a relationship with the person that you're interacting with, because I feel like the I statements assumes you give a shit about me. So when I make an I statement,
they do.
what you're saying is you're hurting the person you care about.
Right. That is kind of implied, right? You're supposed to be saying it to somebody that
Right.
genuinely is going to be like, "Oh my God."
But if I had an argument with someone on the street and they started using I statements, I don't give a fuck about them. So they start using I statements, and I'm not really going to really care. So I do just want to clarify that I think a more ubiquitous response is to not say you're being an asshole and not say I'm hurt, but to say, hold on a second, this is what happened. Now I'm confused. What are the rules? Right?
That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's maybe a middle ground.
Right.
Yeah.
To say, hey, hold on a second. You made a joke earlier and you kind of deflected, and I was okay with that. So I thought that was in the
Well, what's
format.
wrong with just giving an ultimatum?
Well, I think we're assuming that you're still wanting to have the conversation. I feel like an ultimatum is, I don't know how you can continue to have a conversation after an ultimatum.
Well, no, I've actually tested this, and
Yeah?
it's sometimes, and it works. Like, well, when I say it works, it means that either they accept the ultimatum or they don't. So they leave. So if they're being an ass and I say, okay, in order for this conversation
give me an
to continue,
example. Yeah.
So I lean right. I'm a Republican, and I use this on left-wing people who are very rude to me and just want to name call me. I'll say, hey, and they ask me a question. I'll say, well, if you want me to answer, a please would be nice, and a thank you, thank me for taking the time to answer your question. And then some of them will actually do it. They'll say, please, Doug, here's my question, and thank you for any answer you might give. And then I answer it. And then other people, they'll say something like you said earlier, you're treating me like a child. And I say, well, here's the rules, here's the terms, take it or leave it. And then they leave it and they leave. And both ways I win, because I really don't care to have a conversation with someone who's being rude to me. So then they're gone. And if they actually really want my opinion on something, then I have forced them to be kind.
I think you're shining light on something both of us assumed. So fair play. I think Elliot and I are assuming that you want to have the discussion. And so our responses, what we're saying is from the point of view of still wanting to have the discussion. And I think that what you're pointing out is that if you don't want to have the discussion, you can take your ball and go home, and that is totally okay.
But you guys said earlier yourselves that you can have the conversation, but not with that one individual.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
agreeing with you.
Well, yeah. And moving on from there, right. It's, you want to have the conversation, right? And so taking your ball and going home and finding somebody who's going to not be a fucking shithead is going to be a better use of your time. So
yeah, and I have a second tip too.
I do think it does raise my hackles, the please and thank you thing. It feels like it's not setting up an environment where there are equals communicating with each other, and because of that, I think that I would take my ball and go home, no matter how much I wanted to have the discussion, if somebody was setting that up. So
right. But that's fine though.
Yeah, we're different people. I just want to say that that would not work for me, but I understand that works for you.
Yeah, and my second tip, which is more controversial, and my guess is very few people will agree with me.
Okay.
But when it comes to having better conversations, I really believe, and you guys can critique me on this, that it is better to be more dead inside, and then you're less likely to be manipulated, gaslit, all these things.
Oh, Doug.
Basically pretend you're a robot.
Doug,
and
I want to hug you. Oh, honey.
You can hug me if we meet in real life.
I think I might. So, Doug, I thought that for a really long time, and I've actually backed off of that position. And the reason that I have is because I think I aspired to be a robot. I aspired to be like Spock, and that the content of the discussion was the only thing that was moving, logic and reason. And because of that, any kind of emotional appeal, or feeling a certain way shouldn't count. But that doesn't survive reality. We
Okay,
don't.
now that's a great criticism, but hear me out. Hear me
Yeah.
out.
Well,
I'm saying
I
you
mean-
only employ this in certain conversations, not in life.
So, Doug, I think you have a valid response, but I do want to finish the point just so that people who are listening, because I think you jumped right ahead to where I was going. So let me just finish
Yeah,
up really
sorry.
quick. No, you're good. It means we're on the same page. But for people who are watching, you guys, you were not all logicked into all of your opinions. You might have been into some, but that's not how people engage. People think with their head and their heart. And because of that, that's why, some debates are really shitty, because a really shitty person can win because they grabbed everybody's heart and not their head, right? It is a mixture of both. I think that when you disregard the heart, you're disregarding, like, you can have a really good engine, but the heart is the gas in the engine. It's pushing it forward. And so I think that you need to have a mix of both.
Yeah, and let me say, like, I'm a hard numbers guy. I'm a finance
Sure.
guy. I'm a hard science guy. But I love musicals. I mean, I cry at movies. Like,
Yeah,
and
me too.
so my point is that that not to be dead inside in life, but in certain conversations, like if you and I were to talk about carburetors, and we both don't really care about carburetors, but we, just had some fun debating on the best way to rebuild a carburetor. We'd say, oh yeah, okay, Eric, you're right. You win. Like that makes sense. Or you would say, Doug, yeah, you're right. There would be no emotions involved in an issue we really don't care about.
Yeah.
And we can actually just look at the facts. And I'm saying on the most controversial issues in life, if you can actually just for 60 seconds pretend that controversial issue is just the same way as that carburetor, you just look at the facts and say go one way or the other, and that.
Can I push just a little back?
Yeah.
Doug,
I
just
don't
on
want to be
that.
the only
I've got a bit
person.
of an echo, by the way, Eric. I don't know if that's just on my end, but
Oh, sure.
Doug, like if it were the case, right? And I don't know that this is true with carburetors, other things in an engine, but if it were the case that like getting these carburetors built improperly caused like massive amounts of harm and suffering, like if it resulted in a lot of deaths, like wouldn't that be something that would be worthwhile that we be a little emotional about? I mean, I think in general, yeah, tough discussions, it's like, hey, let's all try to calm down a little bit and actually hash this out. But don't you think that there is some value in having an emotional kind of aspect to it?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's about like what's at stake. But
sure.
And I agree with that sentiment. However, my point is that even when discussing what's at stake, discussing an issue with a lot at stake, I think it's still beneficial to try to keep your emotions to a minimum, because like compassion is a very blinding thing. For example, like there's many people who have been killed by being compassionate because they've been taken advantage of by a criminal or whatever. And so, yeah, it's in that situation for a short time when you're trying to figure out something. I think it's better to try to keep your emotions to a minimum. And even when you do that, there's less manipulation. Like you guys were talking earlier about the Ray Comforts of the world.
Really quick, hold on a second, Doug, because you said something that's interesting that I think is kind of at the core of why I'm maybe pushing back a little bit here. You're right that when you are personally thinking about a thing, trying to put your emotions aside so that you can engage with it, on a logical level, can help you evaluate it in a really beneficial way. And I think that you are right about that. But then what you said is having a discussion about it. And that's when another person is involved. And so when another person is involved, it's different than when you're evaluating it on your own. And I think that the example that you give, right, of kind of this dispassionate logical approach it says a lot about the moral value you put on being able to look at the facts. And I think that's fantastic. But when you're engaging with another person, there's a level of passion that's always going to be there. It's just difficult. And maybe I think I might just put a moral value on keeping it because it's hard. It's difficult to have passion and logic at the same time. Your brain does get muddled. It does get foggy. You're absolutely right. But I think I put a moral value on being able to do that. If you can do both, I think you are going to be the most convincing. And I think that you are going to get through in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But
Okay.
watch what you just did. You basically,
What did I do?
because this is what Ray Comfort does. He uses that. You just said that you can be very effective, basically, by including that passion within your discussion. And this is what the Ray Comfort. This is a form of manipulation to get people to see a certain point of view. And by the way, I'm not against that. I'm not against this type of emotional manipulation. I think some of the best arguments on, let's say, the issue of abortion are appeals to emotion. Like, do you really want your daughter, Doug, to give birth to a rapist child? Like, this is a great argument, and it's based purely
I
on
didn't
emotion.
think we were going to get demonetized today until Doug called in. Thanks, Doug.
No, you won't. You won't.
No, you're right. So to be, I don't know. I feel like, I think I just have a different definition of manipulation. And I think that if we got into that definition, we'd lose the point. So
Yeah, I understand.
I think I, based on the way you said that, understand the way you use that word. And given that, I think we're on the same page. I don't.
I mean it to be not necessarily bad. Like
Right.
when I am at the dinner table with my wife and I say, "Please pass the salt," that's a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
If you're using that
figure-
definition, I think we understand where you're coming from.
And
with that,
I totally figure.
Yeah.
And I think
I think we're using a bit more of a negative connotation with manipulation,
Right.
like against somebody's will. Whereas like you're not like holding a gun to
Right.
anybody's head so that they pass the potatoes.
But I think that we can probably add other language like passion versus manipulation that can help. But I think at that point we're probably getting to the point where we're losing the audience.
Well, I want to say something about this.
Yeah, what's
this
up?
passion and
Okay, and then
maybe even speak against what I'm saying. Like I said, to try to be more dead inside. But I actually enjoy it when people talk to me who are very passionate. I actually even enjoy it sometimes if people call me names or whatever, because if there's an audience watching this, it doesn't make them look good. So I'm willing to take the hits because I can take it. And so
Are you a masochist, Doug?
Yeah, it
Is
sounds
that
like-
what you're saying?
Doug, don't get us wrong. You're in good company. We are.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm a masochist, but from a very early age, I've been totally okay with, to be very sincere and honest with you guys, I can't relate to being bullied because I never bullied people. I've never been in a fight when I was young, whatever, but I was pretty impervious to being bullied. Like people could call me names or whatever, and I was very quick to shrug it off. I've been that way my whole life.
So
It's really hard for someone to get me riled up.
I think that's probably a good quality in general. I think that oftentimes, I can't say always, but I think oftentimes that indicates that somebody is more self-assured, right? That we can all think of the super muscly gym bro dude, who just the slightest thing you say to him causes him to act like a 5-year-old, stamping his foot on the ground and yelling and screaming and crying. It's like, well, I don't know that guy's exactly super comfortable with themselves.
No.
But I do also think that too much in that vein can be problematic as well, right? Because then we aren't standing up for the harmful behavior. We aren't pushing back against things that are incorrect. But
Right.
I will say, I think broadly speaking, like all three of us are very much kind of in a similar track here. Maybe a slight
I
nuanced difference. But yeah, tell me where I'm wrong.
I think where we disagree are really fun pain points to push on each other. And I think a lot of it has to do with lived experience. Like, Doug, you offered up an explanation and couched that in your lived experience to give context, right? So
Right.
my lived experience is I have a parent who gaslights. And that parent causes me and has caused me my whole life to question my own reality, right? And so it got to the point where my remembering what happened actually worked against me, because if I ever challenged that parent on remembering something in history, I was punished. And so I reflexively started to forget. And that's still something that I'm working very hard on. And so when people push and try to manipulate my reality in that kind of way and use that kind of bullying, I think because I've gone to enough therapy to recognize that as wrong and not okay, I have a knee-jerk reaction that is much more highly tuned than yours. And so that context
Yeah, and I
might
totally
explain
get
why it's
that. I
different.
totally get that, and I'm sorry that you're.
Yeah, me too. We're all sorry. That's fine.
did that.
But context helps, right? Like, context helps.
Yeah, no.
So, Doug,
Yeah,
we
and
we do have a couple other callers, but I want to give you a chance to finish your statement, and then we'll move on to the next call.
Yeah, I enjoyed this conversation, and I think some people might really dislike what I'm saying with that second point about being more dead inside. But please hear me out. I think when it comes to compassion and passion in general, this is what, like, most people are better than me in these aspects in life and are actually better at causing change to happen. I think that's the strength of these types of emotions, is actually getting off the couch and doing something.
Sure.
Whereas I think the strength that I bring is not being riled up, being able to hear somebody out without having any knee-jerk reactions, and just have a kind of like a Spock type conversation for a few minutes. And so this is why we need each other, is because people are different.
So
It takes all types, that's for sure.
there's a quote, and it comes to mind because I just recently I had to use it in the video that I was doing for Drew, right? He included a quote, and it's been sticking in my mind. And I want to point this out to you, right? Drew points out in his video a quote by Sartre. And it's from a book called The Anti-Semite and Jew. And he's talking in this chapter about how Nazis and anti-Semites were interacting with ideas of race and anti-Semitism. And he says, quote, I'm just going to read this, okay? He says, "Never believe that anti-Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge, but they are amusing themselves, for it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. The anti-Semites have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse, for by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert." So this is somebody who lived through Nazi Germany, and what he saw was a whole bunch of people who were saying, I'm just joking, man. I'm just having this dispassionate conversation about Judaism, and what I'm saying is, what they were saying is anti-Semitic, but don't take it fucking seriously. Why don't you act in a dispassionate way? And I think that the danger there is that if people try to be dispassionate too often, they can lose sight of the fact that that is a tool used by fascists. So just giving you a tool that could be a weak spot in your armor, that people could be saying, hey, I'm just joking. And if you look at it in a dispassionate way, you go, oh yeah, no, they're just joking. but really they're providing cover to their bigotry.
Yeah. Oh boy, you open up a new.
Call in next week. Call in next week, and we can pick it up. Okay.
Well, no promises. I'm not sure what I'm.
All right.
I might be dead next week.
Oh, you
Dead inside, at least.
dead
so.
inside. Don't make me call the authorities on you, Doug. Take care of yourself. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
All right.
See it.
YouTubers should be mandated reporters. Anyway, Jesse Clark. Let's talk to Jesse. Here we go. AGNT. I don't know where that is. New Jersey. Is it New Jersey?
Right. Yep.
Jesse. It said NT and not NJ, and I misunderstood.
Oh.
Let me get your volume up because you're really, really low. Could you speak a little louder into the mic?
Okay, how's this?
Oh, so much better. Okay.
Okay, good.
What did you want to talk about?
Well, for the last couple of days, I have been obsessed with this Jordan Peterson viral thing.
It feels like
That guy
everyone
Dan-
is.
Okay, I didn't know really because I know it had been recorded a few months ago, and so I thought I might have been late coming to it, but I don't know. Everybody's been talking about it, I guess, and I don't know. But it seems to me that that one guy, Danny, really, he came out with both guns, and it seemed to me that I thought that Jordan really deserved what he gave him, and I was really applauding him. It was like he was a real hero of the whole thing.
Well, I
just want to say also that I think they cut it too soon because if you pay close attention, it was like he didn't really get to finish. It was like, he said, you're really nothing. Then he went on to say, you're not a Catholic. And he was really trying to pin him down as to what he was. And because he never really said that. He couldn't really say what he was.
Yeah.
But he was just trying to pin him down, but they cut him off way too soon.
So
and
I think
go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. I just want to chime in on it too.
Okay.
I think that the reason why I'm talking about this is because the way I'm seeing everybody else interact with this, it's about, here's how you should interact in a debate. Here's, winning or losing or whatever the case is. And I think that there's another text to this. There's a subtext that people aren't picking up on. And the subtext, I think you subconsciously absolutely did pick up on it. And so I want to point it out here. Right?
Okay.
The subtext is that, right, they were negotiating the type of conversation they were going to have. And so if you look back at the conversation between Danny and Jordan Peterson would escalate slightly and get a little bit more snippy. And so Danny would reflect that. He would go, oh, these are the rules for the conversation, right? And so he would reciprocate. And then Jordan Peterson would escalate. And then Danny would reciprocate. And
they went up and down.
And I think that ultimately, Jordan Peterson said, you're really a piece of work, aren't you? You're really something. And Danny said, you're really nothing.
Aren't I? Yeah.
And so what you had was someone being held to the exact same social standard, right? Because the way you interact in those kinds of informal discussions is not explicit, and it is constantly being negotiated between the two people who are having it. But what you need, the only reason you can have that discussion is if you agree to both follow the same rules. Jordan Peterson got really pissed because somebody was reflecting the same energy back at him. What everyone else did is they sat back, they complied, they humbled themselves because they valued being humble, which I sincerely appreciate. Atheists have a stereotype, right? But what Danny did, I think, is entirely okay. And that is that when you get the energy and you reflect it back, you're on the same level. And as long as both of you are okay with that, it's cool. I've heard some rough conversations between people, but they're all cool with it, so it's fine. But I think it got problematic when Jordan Peterson then said, "I'm done with you," because he could not stand being held to the same standard.
Exactly.
I would say real quick, just that, while in general, whenever I'm engaging in these types of conversations, in person, online, whatever, I often have this motivation of being calm, of being charitable, of being kind. Absolutely, right? And there are many times where I'll call others out for not engaging in that way sometimes, right? Where I think they've gone too far over the line, they're being too aggressive, they're being, ad hominem-y, all that good stuff, right? I have seen Danny talk about that interaction. And one of the things that, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm getting his words right, I would hate to put any words in his mouth. We all know everybody hates that. But my understanding is in part that he went into this discussion with a very specific goal in mind. And that goal was to demonstrate Jordan Peterson's outright unwillingness to clarify purposefully, right? And what Danny was saying was, look, there is this guy that acts as if he values truth, acts as if he values really investigating and hashing out the nuance of our conclusions, and yet this man purposefully engages dishonestly, and with that goal in mind, I think he knocked it out of the fucking park.
Yeah.
Was he the kindest person? No, but did he accomplish his goal? I think yes.
So
fuck yeah.
Well,
yeah.
The thing, that part doesn't piss me off. That's the thing. That part is not what pisses me off. If somebody has got weird logic or weird reasoning, which I think for Jordan Peterson, that is something that he has logicked into a knot, but it's not as weird of a knot as people think. Because, have either of you? I'm sure you have, Elliot, the pragmatic theory of truth. I think that the pragmatic truth of Christianity is what Jordan Peterson ascribes to. But he's uncomfortable with that fact because no one else uses the pragmatic theory of truth, because you come up with weird shit like that. But the structure of it is not right. The structure is not what bothers me. What bothers me is the double standard. What bothers me is the breaking what was negotiated between the two of them. So I don't know. I feel like if he were to get called out by Danny on not being consistent or not giving a good definition for Christianity or whether or not he was a Christian, any of that stuff, would not have pissed me off at all. It was the double standard that Jordan Peterson responded with.
Sure.
That's the only thing. All of the rest you can work with, right?
I get that.
I don't know. I'm beating a dead horse, but I feel like everybody else is having the discussion about him not being clear on his definitions, or him not, admitting whether or not he's a Christian. And yeah, everybody else can have that discussion, but I feel like the one that nobody's having is this wedge point for me.
No, I totally agree. I don't think that's something that people have really talked about. And just to be super clear, it's not the lack of clarity. Because there are many people that engage in conversations that I will have criticism at the end and say they weren't clear and that caused problems in the discussion. It is, for instance, that moment where he says, I may be a Christian, I may not be, but I don't have to tell you. It's
Yeah,
that
exactly.
added layer of like, I am purposefully not going to clarify, which I think is in line with what you're saying in regards to, it's the fact that it's not that he was fallacious. It's not that he made a joke. It's not that he told the other person ow when they stepped on his toes. It's that he did not offer that in return,
Right. No
that
reciprocation.
behavior.
Yeah. And the rest, I think, the rest we can be dispassionate about, just like our last caller was saying, right? You could be a bit of a robot, but
You have to demand we play on the same field with the same rules, right? With the same ref. If not, then we're not playing the same game.
yeah.
You know?
And
Exactly.
those
Exactly.
are the only discussions categorically that I will walk away from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it would be really cool if somebody, if when he said something like that, one of the people who was interviewing said, "Well, I walked away from the table. Well, I'm not gonna. I've had it, and then he just walked away from Jordan Peterson. That
Yeah.
would have been good.
Yeah.
And I find that Jordan Peterson, he deals a lot with. He just says a lot of deepities, and and what a deepity is to the extent that it is true, it is trivial, and to the extent that it is profound, it is false, and yet it feels true and profound.
Yep.
Yeah.
He constantly uses those.
Yeah,
So,
and if Jordan Peterson was an average person at a gas station, I wouldn't spend any fucking time talking about them on a show,
Yeah.
It's because, for instance, Jordan Peterson has specifically aligned himself with organizations and individuals that are actively promoting harmful behaviors and things that are just outright untrue, right?
Well,
and because of that,
he had Bibi Netanyahu on his podcast a few months ago, right?
oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like Daily Wire stuff.
Fuck
yeah.
that. No,
So,
how about fucking Netanyahu? Like,
yeah. I mean, again, it for me is there is a level of difference. There is a level of difference, an average person saying deepities, and somebody like that is actively causing individuals to, follow them and engage in the world around them in a way that, again, I think is demonstrably harmful. And I use the standard and have for a long time now because I think it's a powerful one, which is to an individual's criteria, right? So when I say things like this person is promoting harm, I think they are promoting harm in a way that is contrary to their own conclusions.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like they are doing things that actively go against their own stated goals and stuff, right? And I think we can show that. That's the same thing with Christianity. It's like I think we can show that. I think we can show that with Islam. I think we can show that with astrology. So yeah, that's my big thing with somebody like Peterson, okay, he says some dumb shit, I wouldn't have a problem except for the fact that he's actively attempting to, make a bunch of money and getting people to behave a certain way, and that causes problems.
So,
and he comes on with this grandfatherly scowl and
oh, absolutely,
like that.
Absolutely,
And it's just.
He has given us some really good lines, right? Like, up yours, woke moralist. Like, that one will never die for me.
Well, in that way, he's a lolcow. But I think that what's worse, and I brought this up already, and, it'll keep getting brought up, but he is only going to get bigger from us having this discussion and from everybody reacting to the video.
Uh-oh.
He's not... Like, he can get called out, sure, and whatever, but every single time, even when he is demonstrably, factually, unbelievably wrong or terrible, the more the more people who don't like him talk about him, the more patrons he gets. It is consistent. It happens. And this will grow this person. So it's important to have this discussion, but we also need to recognize the cost. And the
I
cost
should have
is
called them.
no.
no, Jesse.
Because Jesse, the thing is, I don't think people really realize it, and it gives us the opportunity to point out the sobering fact that the cost of this is bringing him more attention, and that attention gets him more supporters. It's one thing to be popular and get support, but to be popular and be wrong, the support that you get is diehard. They'll stick with you for life. If they will subscribe to you when you are at your worst, then they're ride or die. Like, and those are the supporters that he's getting right now. Yeah.
Can I push back a little? But I know we have some other callers, so I wanted to give Jesse a second to like wrap up. We can get to them, and then I'll push back a little before we grab the next person.
Okay. Good. That's push back. I don't want to just be mean to you. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Jesse. Jesse, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we moved on to the next call?
Oh no, thank you. I just wanted to thank you guys both very, very much for taking my call, and have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right, pushback. What do you got?
So here's my little pushback, okay? And it's very nuanced, so I don't even know that it's actually a pushback. But so you said like, well, by us kind of talking about it, we're still kind of perpetuating, we're still kind of growing, like they're still going to get attention. I think what we have there is kind of like rising and falling waves. And so what we get is, for a little bit of time, there will be that Andrew Tate that no matter what you do, if you talk about him at all, he's going to just kind of keep rising and keep rising. But like a peak of a wave, if you notice, right? It's down here. It's pretty big, right? It's pretty wide base. But as it rises, that field gets narrower and narrower. That peak is so much smaller, And I think
I don't understand.
I think what happens is you will get these bad ideas or bad individuals that will kind of attract a lot of this attention, no matter what you do. And even pushing back on them will still cause their tide to rise, right?
Yeah.
But I think what it does is by using those individuals as that poster child in that moment, it restricts that pool that is actually in line with those ideologies. And I think
I understand. There's only so much.
Do you feel like?
Yeah, there's only so much room at the top, and if you're going to have a shitty idea, there's only so many people who are going to fall into your shitty idea. Totally understood. You get diminishing returns, especially the more niche you get, right? That said, I don't think that matters anymore. Last time he was in the public eye, I believe he was making over $400,000 per month. I believe his estimated net worth was recently clocked in over $100 million. It does not matter if he's reached market saturation for his niche. He doesn't need to grow more to be filthy rich and have a gigantic platform that he's using, right? And I think that there's enough room at the obscenely wealthy level that you say it's restricted, but the pool is so big that even that restricted is enough.
And I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. I think that is a worthwhile thing for us to keep, but just a little push the view a little bit further, a little bit more long term, right? Yeah. Somebody like, let's take Andrew Tate, right? Who has these really, really specific ways, views on how, people should engage in society. I think it's fair to say that 250 years ago, 500 years ago, a lot more people were in line with those type of views, right? That base that lifted that wave of those types of individuals that engaged in that behavior 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. They were the kings, right? The ones who fully 100% agreed with that. They were the kings, and they were fucking everywhere, man, because everybody really agreed with it.
Right.
But as people continued to kind of push back on it, sure, it elevated some of these people to these statuses. And yeah, there was still a shit ton of them. But as we continued to do this, we have narrowed that field further and further. And the long view of history is one where people like Andrew Tate, people like Jordan Peterson, people in that vein, I think we're restricting that pool further and further to the point that eventually none of us will agree with that. Like, that is where I think we're going. Again, maybe that's just a bit naive. Maybe that's a bit utopian.
I think it's utopian. The pessimistic view.
Yeah. Be a doubter.
I'm sorry to, but and then we'll get to our last caller, I promise. The pessimistic view is that Jordan Peterson, what he defends, and he says this outright. He says this in the video. He says it in things that he's been, in talks, everywhere he's been, in his books. His primary defense is to maintain hierarchical structures, right? You've heard him say that over and over again, because what he is in defense of is the system as it is. And I think that the kings went from being the people who needed to defend the systems on their own to relying on the Jordan Petersons and the Andrew Tates. And even if their spheres of influence are smaller, it just means that the people who are currently in power, who are benefiting from the most, need 1,000 of Jordan Peterson. They need the Daily Wire. They need Fox News. They need, Christian Broadcasting Network. They need, the manosphere, right? They need the Andrew Tates, right? What you have, like, looking at this cog and recognizing that he has a niche pool. I guess if we're limiting it to Jordan Peterson, but when you're zooming out that way, I can't help but see that over thousands of years, the structures that are in place are relying on whatever they can to keep themselves in power. And it's still happening. And it's continuing to happen. And I think that they're just going to rely on more people like Jordan Peterson, like MAGA, like Blue Lives Matter movements, like, I can continue.
And I know this is, I'm the bright, sunshiny, optimist, and you're the downpour rain cloud, pessimist. I think, because I'm with you. You're like, hey man, look, I don't know. The Catholic Church is still kind of super hardcore, yes. But I think we can show that their power in a lot of those places has waned in a lot of ways that is allowing, as long as we keep pushing. My stance is not one to say, we've done it, let's sit on our fucking asses. No. Of course not. Well, it's just one to say, hey, let's take a moment to go, we've made some progress, We have, and we're backsliding. Yeah, well, I don't disagree with
that. We've made
either.
progress as long as we don't see what ICE is doing right now.
Oh, yeah. Man, actually, what's going on in LA right now is actually a really, really big issue, and it should be something that
the National Guard has been called on riders.
Definitely.
I agree. It's rather pessimistic, but I feel like if anything, it helps light a fire under people's asses.
Yeah, we need pessimists and we need optimists, because the pessimists are the ones that get everybody out, to the rallies and we get shit done. And the optimists are the reason that we all feel, like we're sane enough to be able to come out tomorrow.
Touche. All right. With that said, that context, I know we have only a little bit of time left. We have a caller who's been waiting for an hour and is not going to get much time with us. And regardless of who that caller is, the fact that they're not going to get much time is not particularly fair. And I want to recognize that before I bring them on. Sorry, dude. That said, John in Canada, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hey.
Hi, Eric.
Hi. Doing okay. I know that we do not have much time, but I'm looking at the notes, and I am seeing that you wanted to touch on what we talked about last week and then ask about climate change. I don't think we're going to have time to go over climate change, but I'm interested in kind of clearing up a bit from last week. So what was it that we talked about last week?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to apologize for how I came off.
About
I
what?
got heated.
Well, but about what? What specifically?
Oh,
Like
you
what-
don't remember?
Well, I think that you could be apologizing for using a certain word, or you could be apologizing for a lot of things. What is it specifically that you think requires an apology?
Oh, well, actually, kind of think about it. I really don't know. Okay,
Sure.
raising my
So
voice. Let's put it that way.
okay. So raising your voice is not the thing that requires an apology for me. The thing that I feel should get an apology is we were talking about trans people with a trans person on the phone, right? Who
Atticus?
right. And Atticus was giving you the opportunity to talk to a trans person. And what you were doing was you were bringing out these conceptions of trans people that you already had in your mind and bringing them out as examples. And we kept saying, there's a person here you can talk to instead, right? But it felt to us like you were more interested in your examples, right? In the crummy idea that you have of trans people, instead of just engaging with the trans person who was right in front of you. That's what I think requires an apology, because you had an opportunity to engage with somebody, and instead of doing that, you engaged with the thing in your head. You could do that anytime, but you really missed an opportunity last week.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, I apologize for not having a real conversation with your friend.
Yeah.
But I stand by but I stand by what I said.
Well, and I think that an exercise in talking to I think I think that's really, really, like, you can have difference of opinion on lots of things, but if it's about whether or not people are sick in the head, dude, I can't even begin to say how deeply wrong that is. But I think that talking about climate change is going to be something that we have to pick up on another day.
Okay.
I did want to address last week, though. It's one thing to apologize, but if you're apologizing for raising your voice, I don't care about that as much as I care about you not listening to and engaging with this person, right? You were talking about a group of people and you had someone in that group who was right there, who were ready to talk to you, and you were not listening.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know how I feel, Eric.
I think that I can feel bad ways about a person and still be a shithead for not listening. You can feel whatever way you want, but when you don't listen, you're not doing it doesn't justify it. What you did was not justifiable. You should feel bad about not listening and engaging with a person who wanted to listen to and engage with you. It sounded like you just wanted to wait for your turn and that didn't feel like it was useful for conversation. But I do think that you're the kind of person who will think about it and really think about it. And I think that by the time you call in next time, you will have thought about this and we'll be able to pick up and move from there. Okay?
Well, until next time, Eric. Until next time.
Take care. I know we did not have a lot of time, but I felt like that was an important thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no. All good. I think it's an odd stance that people have, where their belief or their conclusion is like purposefully denigrating or dehumanizing or bigoted towards a group or an individual. And their response to you saying something like, well, like, that's hateful, is like, well, it's just my belief.
Well,
And I guess I don't know that this will ever do anything, maybe, but I guess there's just part of me that just wants them to just be like, and,
Well, so
take the next step. That's
Yeah.
my belief. And it's bigoted, like, okay, cool.
So-
like, fine. Now you know that's a bigoted stance. I mean, I don't know.
I think that what John sometimes does is something that a lot of people do. He talks in bumper stickers. His points are shallow, and they're shallow because they're things that he picked up from people who are telling him what to think. You see points that he's brought up as conclusion headlines in articles written by, transphobic, or TERFs or whatever the case is, people about trans people. So it's no wonder that that's what he's saying, but I don't think that he's engaged with it on a deeper level. And so when you talk to him about it, he thinks he's a good person and he's just repeating what he's heard. And I don't think he has realized that what he's saying is not meshing with the person inside who still sees himself as a good person. And because of that, he's just being entirely uncritical,
Yeah, I think
Like-
I think I've seen that in others as well.
And I feel like, yeah, it's really dismissive. And I'm sorry, it is really dismissive. And I don't like to be dismissive of people. But there are lots of uncritical people out there. And having someone who's an example of that is just representing what is out there. There are uncritical people out there. So what do we do? I think if somebody views themselves as a good person and is capable of empathy, then if you make them think about it, they may change their minds. But and so I do have hope for people like John, but he is right now uncritical. Anyway, all right. It sounds like I'm here listening to myself talk. I apologize. All right, so
No,
I do
you're
want to
good.
read the
No,
super
you're
chats.
good. I know we're at the end, so.
We are. I want to read the super chats. If you want to send a message and want it read on air, want to make sure that we see it. Yes, I'm hosting and I'm also producing, making sure the show is going out, putting in the lower third, trying to read the super chat. I'm doing 10 things at once. We're not going to get to read all of the people in the chat. But if you want to make sure we read it, you can send a super chat. We read it at the end of every episode. Thank you to My Unfinished Journey, sent $2.22. Thank you. Says, Hail Eric, SR, and Substantive Dialogue. Cheers. I like that. John Klein sent $10. Thank you, John. And says, I have a passion for the dance, and if your friends don't dance, then they're no friends of mine. Dun, da, 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 da. Thank you, John. That's going to be in my head.
Yeah. Love that song.
If you like
it's
the
very
show,
silly,
right?
It's very silly. If you've ever seen the music video, I don't know that this is still the case, okay, you guys, but many years ago, I once showed up to that music video to watch it one day, to dance around like an idiot, and saw that the top comment was, "Man, this new Game of Thrones intro is weird," and was just like, oh my God, that's so perfect. Oh my God, that's so funny.
If there's a fan cut, that's fantastic. If not, I might need to create it. Rogue Lesser sent $1.99. Thank you, Rogue Lesser. Says, trying to remain hopeful today. Thanks, Eric. So the hope is, we can see, is we're here and we're having this discussion. And the only way that we're going to move forward is through nuance, through charity, and through recognizing when that charity is not being returned. We are engaging thoughtfully and in the way that we want to see it happen. And I'm really proud of that, right? Watching what happened on Jubilee, over and over again, because I was editing that video, really sunk into me why what we're doing is important. Because these discussions that are not formalized, like they're what most people have. Not everybody has an Oxford style debate with their neighbor. So you got to recognize what's important and how to engage there. And I really, really appreciate that. And if you like that, if you want to support that, consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Every little bit goes to support this show. And I literally roll it right over into the cost of running this. It is almost making it, but that's okay. It's worth doing, and we all see the value in it. So cheers to that. Elliot, I love having you on, brother.
It's fun. We always have a good time.
I'm the meanest to the people I like the most, and I'm so mean to you. No, I am
bad at all.
But we bounce it back and forth.
We know where we both stand. You know, you're a little bit more on the pessimist side. I'm a little bit more on the optimist side. But like we said, you know, the pessimists get people out to the rallies, and the optimists get people out to the after parties. So that's what that's what we're all here for, and we need each other, man.
It's interesting. I feel like people don't think of me as a pessimist necessarily, and yet
You're
I
not
totally
really.
am. You know,
I mean,
when you listen to the
you got
words
a
coming out of my
flavor of
face.
it, but you know, whatever.
Anyway. All right, brother. I think it's time for. I know that you've got plans, but I'm going to head over to the after show on Discord for a bit. If people want to join, they can go to the link in the notes for this show, and we'll absolutely see you there. Am I going to see you second Sunday of next month? Beautiful.
I'll be back.
Unless, I swear, when people call out, they get sick. I call you. I'm like, Elliot, do you want to hop on? And you are so down every time. I'm so appreciative of you. If I don't see you before then, I'll see you next month. Take care, brother.
Hell yeah.
For everybody else, until next time, I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Secularity.
This is I did it. I finally messed up this time. This is Skeptic Generation.
We're glad we had this talk.
Perfect.